The new episode of Innovation in Government, presented by Carahsoft, recorded on location at West 24 in San Diego, is available on demand. Watch and listen to leaders from the Navy, Coast Guard, Space Command, and the Marine Corps explain how artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and network modernization are revolutionizing defense strategies and operations. You'll learn more about innovations transforming government and military capabilities. For more information and to watch on demand, visit innovationingov.com. See a vision of the future of national defense. Welcome to Innovation in Government from the HIMSS24 conference, hosted by the Healthcare Information and Management Systems Society, presented by Carahsoft. I'm your host, Francis Rose. Over the next hour, you'll meet leaders in government and industry who are at the front lines of data management, artificial intelligence, large language models, and more in the healthcare sector. Leaders from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT, and the Defense Health Agency will be here. There are a couple of key themes on the floor of this conference that shouldn't surprise anyone. They're themes that permeate the federal government's efforts now in all kinds of areas. Tim Boltz is healthcare strategist at Carahsoft. He tells me what healthcare leaders say are their top priorities now.
Cybersecurity is hot right now with the recent cyber attack at Change Healthcare that has disrupted this industry for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Cybersecurity is top of mind for everyone. And then I would say AI, ML, artificial intelligence, and the impact it's going to have on healthcare, not only patient care, treatment, but also optimizing the way organizations handle data, helping physicians get time back, be more efficient so they can spend time with their patients and optimize the care that they're delivering is I would say a close second. So those two, cybersecurity seems to be resonating throughout the entire conference, and then AI ML is the other hot topic that we're discussing.
The desire for organizations to be cyber secure seems self-evident, especially in the healthcare sector. So I'll go to AI and ML. I see a lot of focus here, not just on AI and ML for the sake of using it, but very specific use cases. What's driving that?
So our healthcare providers are being asked to do more with less. I think what the pandemic showed us was sort of how fragile, right, our frontline workers are. Workforce and just the burnout that physicians, clinicians, nurses, the people that are providing care, that's what every healthcare organization is struggling with. And so how do we make the people that are providing care that are quintessential to us, right? Receiving good care, being healthy, recovering from an ailment. How do we keep those frontline workers happy, engaged, still in love with what they do every day? And so the use case for me with AI ML is how do we impact those folks every day that come taking care of us, right, and give them time back in their day to really provide care, which is what it's all about. Not data entry, not being an admin, which is not what they went to school for, and not what they're highly trained for. And so that's one of the use cases that I see with AI ML, is that sort of automation and creating more efficiency. But then two, it's not far out, at least from a healthcare perspective, that our providers of care are going to be able to provide better treatments based on the power of AI and ML, right? The computational power of delivering, new treatments, new drugs, new protocols to treat cancer, and also autoimmune diseases that have sort of been on the fringe, right? That aren't mainstream. It's only a small percentage of the population. that has these rare diseases, AI/ML allows us to pour resources into treatment for those things that maybe haven't been done before, which will provide better care for all of us and make us more fit and more healthy, so that we can enjoy our lives. And so those are the use cases that I see in AI/ML from a very, very, very high level. And then I would say the other thing that's driving this is data. We talk about AI and ML and sort of the power that it has to change the way care is delivered. But what I'm seeing is a lot of organizations need to get a handle on the data, get a handle on where data is stored, their governance of data, and then how do they access that data, which is really the driving force of AI/ML, right? These large language models need data, and they need accurate data. And so I think that is what we as industry need to help our healthcare agencies with, is they have the data. How do we help them manage it, govern it, and really take advantage of it so that we can launch the AI/ML of the future, which we haven't even thought about the impacts, right? I think it's pretty cool, but I don't know if we truly understand the power of AI/ML currently.
Tim Boltz of Carahsoft at HIMSS 2024. The Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT is creating what one ONC leader calls a network of networks. That network will allow providers to share data no matter what their own infrastructures consist of. Mark Nees, Acting Division Director of the Interoperability Division at ONC. Here at HIMSS, he explains how the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement will work and what ONC's aiming for in creating it.
So the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement, or TEFCA as we call it, is a network of networks the goal is to connect disparate health information networks together to achieve more seamless health information exchange across the country at scale, nationwide. And the way we like to analogize it is really if you think about cell phones. So everyone has a cell phone, Sprint, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. It just connects. You pick up the phone, you dial a number, and it goes right through to your mom in California. That's not how health IT works right now, and that's really the goal. You don't know what's going on in the back end with phones. You just know that it works. And with health IT, there's a lot of challenges and issues, the silos that have been created over the years. And even though we've come a long way with health information exchange, there's a long way to go. So TEFCA, the goal is to create this network of networks that has these qualified health information networks as the super nodes on the network. They sign an agreement, achieve the trust with the RCE, the recognized coordinating entity. They bring their customer base, participants, and then they sign a flow down provision in their contracts, their data sharing agreements. And then everyone has the same level of trust and privacy, security, the same requirements, and you go from there. And we've already got 7 designated QHINs on board, which is extremely exciting.
I understand the analogy that you're using about cell phones. Is it different in a data environment, though? If I call you,
right,
my voice goes over the network and so on. I understand that.
Yeah.
Is data different, or is it similar to maybe the idea of me texting you and that information goes through the network sorts all of that out?
Yeah, it's not a one-to-one.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, but the goal of the health information networks is not to house the data or to hold it. They can, but generally they're going to be just intermediaries that move the information from one point to another. We rolled out TEFCA with document-based exchange, which is an IHE standard, but I'm sure you're familiar a little bit, and maybe folks are, with FHIR, and we're rolling out FHIR in a new version of the Common Agreement, which is the legal agreement that will be signed by all of the QHINs and the RCE to enable point-to-point transactions, facilitated FHIR, where participants on either network can share directly with each other based on endpoints that are in the directory. So it's a much more, I'd say, advanced way of sharing that's moving the needle in many ways. And, it's important for us to meet the market where it was, but then also move it forward.
Yeah, when you met the market where it was, what did the market tell you about what they wanted you to do
Right.
to facilitate what you needed to do?
Well, it's a big market. So, some people were happy. I mean, the key is we worked with the recognized coordinating entity, who's our partner in all of this, our contractor, the Sequoia Project, did a lot of outreach to different groups. And, we heard that some people wanted to start with IHE, some people wanted to start with fire. And we ultimately felt like the market wasn't quite there yet, and it was important to get TEFCA up and running. It went live in December, which is amazingly exciting, a game changer, but there's still a long way to go to realize the promise that we see in it. But rolling out version 2 of the Common Agreement and the QTF, the Q and Technical Framework, which is the technical requirements, end of this month, and then moving on, in the following months with the QTF, is going to be a big step to get to the fire-based exchange that we want to see.
So you kind of anticipated where I wanted to go next. You've talked about this long way to go yet.
Yeah.
What are some of the mileposts in that you see coming?
I mean, it's a lot, because we see this as a game changer. I mean, this is really hopefully going to change the way health information is shared. So it went live in December. We have 7 qualified health information networks who went through a rigorous onboarding and testing process, and they're on board. We're still through the RCE working to bring on other market leaders to come on board, and I want to note that a lot of these entities are usually competitors, but they're coming together because the government's vision, based on the 21st Century Cures Act, is to bring everyone together, bring everyone on board, and work together to reach what everyone wants to see is more seamless exchange. So we're rolling out version 2 of the Common Agreement in the end of March, and then we're also going to build out exchange purposes. We have 6 exchange purposes right now. We're working on implementing all of those, and then looking forward to how do we bring everyone on board, bring companies, organizations, entities, make them understand what we're doing, and obviously working with our federal partners, CMS, CDC, VA, DOD, others, to make sure it works from a public perspective and a private perspective.
How will you know that you've gotten it right? How will you know that you've gotten it where you want it to be? Is it just this works according to the way that the legislation was written, or is there more to it than that?
Oh, there's more to it than that. I mean, just getting it up and running is great, but just at this conference, I've been talking to tons of people who are saying you need to do this, you need to do that, and there's always going to be tweaking, there's always going to be updating. Health IT is evolving every day, and we need to be flexible and work with those changes and make sure we're agile and able to address all of the changes that are coming up, and to hear what everyone's saying. We want to hear from patients and providers. Patients are always at the center of everything we're doing, and we want to make sure that they understand what TEFCA is and know how to become a part of it.
Mark Nee of the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT. The military health system's reimagining how it provides care to its customers. Its digital transformation is just one part of that makeover. Naomi Escofri is Chief Accelerator Officer and Innovation Program Manager at the Defense Health Agency. She tells me other military health leaders around the world face some of the same challenges DHA does.
The challenge we're facing now is honestly what everyone else is facing. I had a conversation last night with South Korea and Canada and the UK, and we were sharing stories, albeit kind of sob stories, but we were sharing stories about the challenges we're having. We're having clinician burnout, which I like to call moral injury. We're having to where in our system, patients are not staying in our system because they cannot get appointments. We're having challenges with referrals. We're having challenges with access to care, their data that we need health care for. And what we're trying to do is figure out how to get after that. And the one thing that we keep coming back to, and actually the colleagues that I met last night are having the same issue, is technology. That's going to get us to a place where we can support the moral injury, we can bring our patients back because they have access to data. And General Crossland has spearheaded a team called the Accelerator to really get after those things.
The challenges with the other military health systems around the world strike me as the best analogy for what you're trying to do, because I imagine there are tremendous differences between the kinds of care that the military health system provides and commercial providers provide, and so on.
Yes. And I'm glad you said that, because we have kind of 2 challenges that are different. One is our patients are our providers, right? So you met with General Crossland. She is a family practice doctor, and she receives her health care at an MTF, at a military treatment facility. So she sees it on both sides. We also are military treatment facilities that are training facilities for combat. Right, you're in there to figure out how to deliver healthcare downrange, and it just so happens that obviously we have beneficiaries in our healthcare system. So when their parents are deployed, they also need access to care, and they need to get get great health care. And so that's what happens at the military treatment facilities. And so those are the biggest differences, but one being that we have a medical ready force that we have to prepare for our national security.
Yeah, is there a role, what is the role, I suppose, for industry to play as you're meeting with folks here, talking to them about what your challenges are? It's not a one-to-one exactly, but I imagine there are some things that you can see in the commercial healthcare sector that will apply in the MHS.
Absolutely. So what we're doing right now, bringing that kind of technology into the Defense Health Agency is already here. I mean, you see it around all these companies. We are told on multiple levels that, well, your cybersecurity is a challenge. We can't get through your firewalls and those type of things. And while that is a challenge, and we do acknowledge that, we also acknowledge that there's a lot of people with incredible ideas and a lot of talent that can get us through those barriers and get them through it quickly. So what we're looking for industry to do is take a look at our challenges, our pain points, and say, hey, here are some options, right? Here are some ways that you can take a look at maybe technologies or perhaps some infrastructure or maybe some cloud development. Like, here are some things that fit within your kind of architecture, if you will, to be able to get after making sure our data is secure.
You're speaking here about the My Military Health digital platform. That's part of the digital transformation that I talked about with General Crossland. What does that mean to the person that's receiving care through the military health system?
That means they get their quality of life back. Their well-being is now in their hands. They're the CEO of their healthcare. Right now, if you're in the NCR, and you're active duty and you want to get an appointment at an MTF, you have to call that MTF and then wait. And then they may say, we don't have any appointments. So you have to hang up and call another MTF and then another. See where I'm going? You have to figure out how to get care in the area that you live. This is going to allow them to have on-demand care, on-demand scheduling. It's going to allow them to have access to data in terms of if they're having a challenge, maybe a wellness challenge, they don't have to call an MCF. They can go to their app, they can click on their link, they can answer a couple of questions, and it can guide them through maybe what their anxiety is or some other challenges they're having. Not severe, but just moderate, just giving them that comfort level at their disposal, right? At whatever fits in their lifestyle. The example I like to use is a lot of our military obviously they have children. And if you have to take a kid to soccer practice, one has an ear infection, then you have to make dinner. I can click online and get an appointment right then and there, I'm going to do that, right? I actually can just do it right there in the comfort of my own home.
Yeah, we're almost out of time, Naomi, but it strikes me that all of what you're trying to do is happening at a time where the overall provision of care is dramatically changing. Pandemic and the proliferation of virtual care and all of that. How will that impact long-term what you're trying to do?
I think what it'll do is we have to change our workforce. Mm-hmm. We have been a system of when you go into the office, that means you're working. Well, now in a virtual space, you still are working. So how do we get our leadership, which General Cross is 100% behind it, how do we get our providers, how do we get our patients to get accustomed to having that bedside service, but it's virtual, right? That's our biggest challenge right now, and we're doing that in that transformation of care. We're going after operationalizing well-being and value-based care to where it's no longer output-based, it's outcomes. Do you feel good as a patient? Do you feel good as a person? So that way you don't have to go to an MTF. So that's what we're doing.
That's Naomi Escofri of the Defense Health Agency. Cyber leaders here at HIMSS say the number of attacks they deal with is growing. The kinds of attacks are changing too. Aaron Shaha is Chief Information Security Officer for CyberMax and a former technical director at the National Security Agency. He says the threat level isn't just getting bigger.
We're seeing the velocity of attacks increase. So we just saw Change Health, other organizations that have been targeted, very difficult and challenging situation for them. Even if they're doing the right things, we have forces outside of our control that might be initiating things, right? Not everything's a nation-state actor coming at us for sure, but there are certainly nation-state actors engaging in funding criminal actors, pushing their weapons to criminal actors. So when we have a nation-state giving a cruise missile to the cyber equivalent of a cruise missile to a cyber criminal, it's very difficult for anybody to defend against. So these hospitals are really in a tough situation. I was recently speaking with one of the CISOs of a regional healthcare, and they're very focused on availability, which I, from my perspective, coming from a DoD background, really hadn't considered and appreciated that. But it makes sense, right? Availability, keep the system up, right? Shipping blood was one of the things we kind of focused around. Their blood bank. They're like, hey, the system, we have to keep it up, right? I have to move blood, right? It's a just-in-time delivery. We have to bring it there. Makes perfect sense. So sometimes the incentives are aligned for more availability than confidentiality. Obviously, they want to protect everything, but Sun Tzu said, if you try and protect everything against everything, you protect nothing.
Yeah.
Loose interpretation of that. So they're in a really challenging spot. Given shrinking budgets, the skill of the adversary that's out there, just kind of the acceleration and the integration of everything, third-party apps, right? Adversaries coming in via connected third-party app. So it's a very difficult situation for them.
As I walk around the show and talk to folks like you and other thought leaders in this space, there are some things that never occurred to me. One of them you just suggested, and that is that there's a supply chain implication here, moving blood and so on. This stuff doesn't just magically appear at hospitals.
Right.
I never considered that part of it.
Yep.
What is the implication for those behind the scenes things that have to happen for things like ransomware, for things like securing systems and networks and so on?
Yeah, so I think there could be some room for policy improvements in there. That's going to be a very difficult conversation, right? I'm on the more skeptical side that government can dictate a solution to this. I think it's such a complicated scenario, multivariant, that it's going to be difficult to kind of just stamp one thing down that makes everything work. We're seeing SEC do it kind of in other areas, holding CISOs, CIOs accountable. That might have second and third order unintended consequences. So there are policy things that could be done. I think that should be a very deliberate and slow conversation, which doesn't match the threat we're seeing right now. So increased funding for the cybersecurity staff, I think, would help. Bringing in SOC personnel, ensuring that the hospitals are there, pulling things up. But you mentioned supply chain. There's even things we're not thinking about from the healthcare side. We're seeing in late 2023, early 24, ransomware attacks hitting Southeast Asia power plants. And as you're well aware, right, hospitals all have backup power supplies and everything, but that's not an unlimited resource. So if we do see supply chain attacks, right, that's the worst case scenario. Is it likely? I don't know, right? But yeah, if we see an attack against the blood supply, overseas antibiotics, right? If they take out a manufacturing plant where we're manufacturing antibiotics in India or overseas, that could have very significant effects towards the U.S. And understanding kind of that long tail of supply chain is very interesting.
You used a word at the beginning of this conversation that I think is interesting to describe the tempo that's going on here. You talked about the increase in velocity. That doesn't, to me, sound like just a quantity thing. That sounds like an impact thing.
It's an impact for sure. Yeah. The impacts have been more devastating. Depending on the numbers you believe, I've seen numbers as high as $100 million a day for Change, as Change Healthcare got hit. Some of their clients, $100 million a day impact, that's real money. That's not trivial amounts of money. So when you're talking about a $22 million ransom payment, that math happens pretty quickly. The problem is a lot of time those ransomware payments don't actually impact. I worked a healthcare ransomware where the client decided to pay the ransomware, and we had a 90% plus failure on the decryption that the ransomware actor provided us, right? And when we asked them, hey, well, we didn't ask him, the client asked him, your key doesn't work, right? They just laughed at him, right? Once the detonation happens, you're in a very challenging spot, right? So I understand wanting to pay, pushing forward, but the impact from that velocity is definitely happening, as well as the speed, right? The adversaries are getting faster, more agile. They're very smart people that are operating against us, whether that's nation-state sponsored or just cyber criminals in general.
The new episode of Innovation in Government, presented by Carahsoft, recorded on location at West 24 in San Diego, is available on demand. Watch and listen to leaders from the Navy, Coast Guard, Space Command, and the Marine Corps explain how artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and network modernization are revolutionizing defense strategies and operations. You'll learn more about innovations transforming government and military capabilities. For more information and to watch on demand, visit innovationingov.com. See a vision of the future of national defense. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today. Cybersecurity isn't a new topic for leaders in the healthcare sector, but cyber is merging with other IT requirements in the sector more quickly and more tightly than ever. Sherilyn Pascoe is director of the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Here at HIMSS 2024, she tells me what's driving that merger.
So the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council recently published its cybersecurity strategic plan for the next 5 years. It talks about one of its foundational principles that it outlines in that strategy is something that really, I think, underscores the importance of cybersecurity to healthcare, which is that cyber safety is patient safety. And we at NIST really want to empower kind of healthcare organizations to reduce cybersecurity risks that impact, the dangers directly to patients. It's really great that, we were able to start this conversation this conference with a conversation about cybersecurity so that we can kind of underpin that as we go along our HIMSS journey, and we talk to our colleagues, talk to vendors around the room, making sure that cybersecurity really is a priority as we're looking at different technologies that are out on the market today.
What is NIST doing specifically to help the organizations, both in government and outside government, that work specifically in the healthcare sector to mitigate that risk that you just talked about?
Yeah, so NIST has been in the cybersecurity space now for 50 years. We do everything from, basic to applied research. We also advance standards and tools that organizations can leverage to help reduce their cybersecurity risks. We really focus a lot on building trust in technology, working with organizations to build more secure, resilient, private technologies so that we can really realize the full potential of those technologies to our society as well as to healthcare. And a couple of the examples of our standards are, the NIST cybersecurity framework, the NIST privacy framework. The NIST cybersecurity framework is now considered the gold standard for cybersecurity. It's used around the world by organizations to holistically address their cybersecurity risks, have conversations with their across kind of business leaders and cybersecurity teams across organizations with their suppliers, really focused on identifying the kind of gaps in cybersecurity that you might have in your organization and prioritizing the resources that are necessary to then tackle those gaps to help address your risks.
Are the cyber principles in the healthcare sector dramatically different than the cyber principles in other sectors, or are they just applied differently because of the different nature of the mission?
Yeah, so the cybersecurity framework is a framework that is used by all organizations regardless of sector. But we do really want folks to tailor your priorities based off of your specific mission. So within the healthcare space, the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council has developed implementation guidance specifically tailoring the cybersecurity framework for the healthcare space because it's important to, there's lots of steps you can take in cybersecurity and you can't take all of them. It's important to really prioritize your actions that will result in the largest impact to reducing your risk. And so having a firm understanding of the mission of the sector can help organizations to kind of put their effort, put their resources towards what's most important.
One of the themes that you touched on in your remarks was the evolving nature of the landscape of cybersecurity. What does that look like, and how do new technologies like artificial intelligence and so on impact the way that organizations should think about their security?
Yeah, so the technology landscape has really evolved over the past decade. It's remarkable to see, the way that technology has changed now, with the growing advancements in artificial intelligence and quantum computing. At the NIST NCCOE, we've signed now 200 CRADAs, legal R&D agreements with technology vendors to try to work with them collaboratively to address cybersecurity challenges. We will put 10 to 20 different vendors in a room together, talk about how we can improve their products, what guidance needs to be developed to kind of address specific cybersecurity concerns, and it's really kind of fun to work with all of these different vendors who are obviously interested in kind of having a market advantage in advancing cybersecurity, but being able to work collectively for the common good, to be able to address cybersecurity within the healthcare space has been just really great to see.
Sherilyn Pascoe of NIST at HIMSS 2024. You're watching Innovation in Government from FedGov Today. Zero Trust has become the default status for cybersecurity across the federal government. The parent organizations of the Defense Health Agency, the Veterans Health Administration, and the other healthcare providers in government all have Zero Trust initiatives in progress. Patrick Conti is Vice President and General Manager of the Americas at Fortanix. I ask him here if Zero Trust in healthcare is different than Zero Trust in other sectors.
I think it's very much the same. The issue with Zero Trust is that Zero Trust has been used as a mitigation for data risk, right? What happens is that data lives someplace, right? It's at rest somewhere, and then somebody wants to move it someplace so they can transform that data. And so while it's at rest, it's pretty safe because it's probably encrypted, and that encryption is probably pretty well known, pretty safe, at least until quantum comes along. And so they want to move it someplace. So now it's going to be encrypted somewhere in a tunnel, but it's going to arrive at a server, and when it arrives at that server, it's going to have to be decrypted. And when it's decrypted, now it's in the clear, so bad guys can come and get it when it's in the clear. So what happens is the industry, our industry, the cybersecurity industry, and the marketplace have wrapped that destination server with Zero Trust. And that means the latest and greatest network, endpoint, and identity and access management solutions. So they sort of like moats around that, right? And it's helped the CISOs sleep better because they think they've done everything they can. The issue, and especially in healthcare right now, is that data is still in the clear. And if the bad guys find their way through those moats or across those moats or whatever, however you want to say it, they can arrive at that server and then they can memory scrape it, or they can find some way to get not just the data, but the formula. Like let's say it was a healthcare life sciences environment and you had a formula you developed for $5 million to find rare diseases or something like that, that could be gone too. So true Zero Trust requires that you actually protect the memory of that destination server. And so one of the things this is one of the transformative things that can happen in the industry is using something called confidential computing to protect that memory so that the memory is a place that your data and your application can go, where now you can manipulate it fully protected without the bad guys being able to steal the data, which is super expensive, or the formula, which may be just as expensive.
You talked before we turned the cameras on too about there being a fourth pillar that you have talked about and promoted in the Zero Trust construct. What's that look like?
Well, that is data, right? I mean, so if it's your network, if it's your endpoint, if it's your identity and access management, our pillars 1, 2, and 3, data protection is the fourth pillar. And this has recently been recognized all the way up through government, all the way through the White House, right? It was added over the last couple of years because it was recognized by the industry that the 3 pillars were not enough. But what some companies and some innovators are doing, and we happen to be one of those, my own company are using this whole concept of confidential computing to encrypt that memory so that you actually can protect the data across all 3 states of the data. So data's like matter, like we learned in school, solid, liquid, gas. Data is either at rest, in motion, or in use. And so being able to protect it while it's in use has been the problem. And so now we have confidential computing, which can allow you to protect the data across that entire life cycle. And that allows you to actually achieve Zero Trust.
Does the infrastructure that healthcare users, deliverers need in order to set up a Zero Trust environment the same as what other organizations use?
It is. It is actually, and it's all available to healthcare organizations, available whether they're government healthcare or whether they're private healthcare. We see large research organizations in federal healthcare that need help on both sides of the fence. They need help with data security, but also they need this application security help because they've developed their own, let's say, algorithms or formulas to transform the data. And the data that they're using, they're collecting from maybe literally thousands of endpoints. They could be rural doctors' offices, or it could be large healthcare groups. That stuff has to come together, be combined safely and securely so the bad guys can't see what you're doing, and then it has to be transformed, and then just the result returned back to the industry, right? But all of that technology is available in the healthcare space as it is in the in other parts of enterprise or government.
Patrick Conti of Fortanix. The Department of Veterans Affairs says it's rethinking interoperability, especially in how it drives business outcomes. One VA leader says 3 pillars have to align to drive interoperability. Dr. Helga Rippin is Chief Interoperability and Veteran Access Officer in the Office of Information and Technology at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I asked her at HIMSS what those 3 pillars are.
Well, the 3 pillars are business, data, and systems and technology. And when you think about interoperability, a lot of people focus on the IEEE definition of the meaningful exchange of information between 2 systems. And we think about interoperability about the end user experience. And when you do that, you have to think a little bit differently about what's important to interoperability. So what do I think about that? Well, then it's a whole different playground, right? And it actually takes a team to do that. So if I go to the CIO and I say, hey, what's interoperability? It's about the systems. Hey, the systems are connected, they're interfaces. And then when I go, hey, let's go talk to the chief data officer, oh, it's all about the data. And I'm like, you're right, data quality, you need to have the same meaning between 2 systems. But let's go talk to the business. Hey, business, what do you think about interoperability? Oh, it's the thing that gives me heartburn. It's about the data. And I said, yeah, you're right. But you know what? What about policy? If you don't allow the systems to exchange information, you can have great data, you can have great systems. Or if you don't have the right workflow, your data quality is going to be at risk. So actually, it's a team sport. And when you think about the team sport, the business is the quarterback. They need to know where they want to go, and they need to coordinate with their team on what play they're going to make. You need to have the blocker so they don't get sacked. So let's say that's the data person. And you need the wide end receiver so that when you actually throw the ball, they're there and actually can deliver the product right when they're ready to deploy it. And you have then the users ready to use it. So that's why the 3 pillars are really important and why it's really about a team sport. There's one other interesting thing to note. Out of the 28 elements to measure interoperability, 13 are business, 9 are data, and only 6 are IT. So it's a really amazing opportunity to work with your business, to really think about outcomes, to work with the data experts and the IT in solutioning something that can really make a difference to the veterans that we serve.
So which of those 28 things are the things that you and your colleagues at VA are focused on most heavily right now?
Well, actually, we're focused on all of them, okay? Because if you fail in one, you don't have interoperability. What we're really focused on is actually talking to our business and saying, what is the outcome that you really need to achieve? What is it that we're really looking after? We've actually done interoperability maturity assessments using those 28 elements over 13 business use cases, right? And you can imagine how exciting people are to say, hey, I'm going to assess where you are, right? But I said, don't worry, that's on me. Yeah. I'm the Chief Interoperability Officer. That score actually reflects my ability to deliver. Then we go and we talk about how do you deliver that? How do you improve that? They get to pick what they want to do, right? And then we come back and we reassess. Lo and behold, wow, we improved our maturity numbers, 1.9 or 2 to 3. Who cares? Okay? Well, maybe I do. Hey, I'm Chief Interoperability Officer, but it really doesn't matter. What really mattered was that we demonstrated improved business outcomes and improved veteran outcomes. So we know that if we work together and that we focus on those 28 elements, whichever ones we can actually make a difference. And that's what's exciting.
Given that you have as many different outcomes throughout the agency, throughout VBA, throughout VHA, throughout cemeteries, that you're trying to drive, how do you communicate with those business owners to understand what exactly they want to achieve so that you know you can give them what they need to do so?
You mean scalability? You're absolutely right, and we've really thought deeply about that because there's only so much one can do. We actually, in the interim, have actually developed tools for our business partners and their teams to use, including like how do they do their own self-assessment checklist and a how to get to 3 guide, because what we found is 3 is really where you want to get at a minimum. Now, VA, we're overachievers. Sometimes we like to go to 4 or 5. We've had those, but that's heroics, and that's actually becoming the leader in the industry. And so that's one mechanism. The key here really is how do you give the tools to the people who are actually doing the work so it's easier for them to do it than yet another thing. And so what we're looking at is how do we incorporate the best practices throughout all the processes that they currently have in place so that they don't have to think yet again, oh, what about interoperability? So if you really want to have a lasting impact, you really have to think about how do you build it into kind of what we do, how we think about things, because that's the only way you can make a lasting impact. And the bottom line is we owe it to the veterans because we want to optimize the investment and get the best outcomes that we can. So yeah, scalability is critical because we have so many fabulous groups doing so many remarkable things. We just want them to tweak out the best outcome while they're at it.
Dr. Helga Rippin of the VA. 3 elements should be on a list of priorities for leaders who are working at the intersection of healthcare and cybersecurity. That's according to Mark Mitchell, Enterprise Security Architect at Netscope and former Enterprise Architect at the Officer of the Comptroller of the Currency. At HIMSS 2024, he tells me he learned those 3 things from both his time in government and his time in industry.
It's really around data protection, I'll say it at a high level, which includes data leak protection, also phishing and ransomware, as well as getting an understanding around user behavior analytics, because that drives a lot of policy application around that.
All right, data protection. Yeah. Where are organizations, especially in the federal government, doing it well, and what are they struggling with?
Well, I would say around PHI, PII, some of the things that we have some common, out-of-the-box classifiers. I think we're starting to get handles on that, especially, in the different channels that it can be exposed. But when you look at CUI, you bring into intellectual property. And I think that's still a struggle, though I do believe in those 3 categories I gave you, the evolution is really happening around AI and ML. So as an example for data protection, we use deep learning, machine learning to enable agencies to build or train their own classifiers. So you can take a sample of 20 to 30 artifacts and it will create a classifier to help you identify that intellectual property, forms, whatever it may be. And then you can apply that to those different channels that a user may be interacting with, either sanctioned cloud services or, let's say, unsanctioned cloud services.
Have we gotten past, quick sidebar, past the AI is cool phase in this sector and to the point where people are now using tools like AI and ML for really hardcore mission delivery? That's a great question. I think that we have gotten past very rapidly the cool phase, and I think there is tremendous value, and you see it. It's pervasive in a lot of the platforms that the healthcare industry now has. What we're seeing is, especially in the federal space, it's where do I let the cool kid grow up and go to college, right? It's how do I safely enable it? So we look at, how do we use justifications to coach users, and also going back to the data protection, being able to apply that within, say, a post into a generative AI engine so that you can still protect that intellectual property that we just developed a classifier for, to say you can use this, but we're not going to allow, say, this source code or this intellectual property to be posted in it. All right, item number 2, phishing and ransomware. Are they, I know they're not the same thing, but are they in the same category?
I use them in the same category because I think that's an evolution in healthcare. Healthcare has always had a problem with ransomware. It's delivered via phishing typically, so I think it's kind of the cause and effect. But I look at it from an AI perspective in that, we're doing a lot to, and I think it's typical in the industry, to try and understand what an encrypted file looks like from a ransomware perspective, and use that deep learning to understand it and be able to stop it as it leaves. And also from the phishing perspective, what does a phishing attack look like using AI and deep learning, and being able to mitigate that when you are able to see all the traffic we see.
The third item, user behavior analytics, what does that look like in a modern environment? What are we seeing in 2024 on that?
Yeah, that's a big one for a couple of reasons. One that's obvious, and maybe some that I think aren't so obvious, but people are starting to understand that. And that is, user behavior analytics allows you to, let's say, assign a score to different behavior aspects of a user and how they interact with stuff. Some of those can be pretty standard, bulk downloads. Some are machine learning, meaning this is anomalous based on this user's behavior for the last 30 days. Or maybe this user is accessing this service from a location that physically isn't possible given the last time they accessed it. But it's not just understanding that, it's then, and those are AI/ML rules, but it's then being able to have it affect policy, meaning I see this anomalous behavior, I'm going to immediately stop download as an action from my sensitive assets, my cloud assets. And then I will also be able to have that permeate into other policies. And that's also big on another front, because so much from a return on investment perspective, so much of total cost of ownership in cybersecurity space now is around logged storage. This dynamic application of policy based on risk means you're doing this in real time, and you're not having to pull as much aggregators from everywhere, assess it, and then do a policy action. So that is something that I think we're going to see in the next year or two, a real understanding on how total cost of ownership around these cybersecurity toolings can be reduced through SASE platforms and things similar to us.
Mark Mitchell of Netscope. The Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT is in phase 2 now of an initiative to help healthcare organizations make their data interoperable. The United States Core Data for Interoperability Plus initiative builds on the original US CDI. Liz Turry is Care Coordination and Collaboration Branch Chief for ONC. She tells me here at HIMSS how the Plus version extends the original.
If we take the floor, that is the U.S. core data set for interoperability, what we've recognized is that it's a great floor for general purposes, but it's not so great for specific use cases. And we've had a lot of questions and a lot of input that we needed more specifics for specific use cases, for quality and CMS initiatives, and public health with CDC and STILT initiatives. So what we've done is we've created this service to take deep dives into use cases and domains in order to look to see where those gaps are, fill those gaps, and also harmonize those data elements across data needs and also across federal partners. Mm-hmm. So it's been a really fantastic way to have a tool to do health IT alignment.
My ears always perk up when I hear federal partners. Who are some of your partners in the federal space on that?
We've got CMS, CDC, SAMHSA, HRSA, NCI. I'm probably missing one or two.
What are some of the challenges that you and your colleagues have run up against in having all that information moving around among all of those organizations?
So every program has its own specific niche data needs, and so what we find is some of the challenges is making sure that we're having those conversations to collaborate and understand, okay, how can we really come to alignment so that we can reuse data. The EHR collects a certain amount of data, and everybody wants to pull that data out of there, but we can't have different definitions of what those actually mean. So this is one of those conversations that we regularly have around, okay, can we use this for this domain? Is this the same definition for this other domain?
Mm-hmm. Well, was meeting those agreed upon standards maybe the biggest hump you had to overcome to get to where you are with this initiative?
Yes, and it's also understanding how those data are gathered at the source, and making sure that we really are getting what we need out of the source, because the data that comes out of EHRs currently is very messy. And what we're trying to do is figure out how do we make less noise. So some of those conversations revolve around the data elements, but they also revolve around the workflows and how those data get collected.
One of the things that I read about in anticipation of talking to you is the importance here of data quality. How does one go about ascertaining the quality of the data, especially when you have it coming from a variety of different sources like you've described?
So there are a number of different ways. I can speak to prior to coming to federal service, I did some work to pull in data from CCDAs, which is a standard, but it's a standard for data structures. It's not a standard for data content. So as I would pull data in from across many different healthcare providers, there was very little alignment in what some of those data actually meant, what those data were. They could have different interpretations of what the standards were, use different value sets. Without going too far into the weeds, it was very hard to do those data analysis and be able to make sure that everything lined up.
I read that you launched the US CDI Plus platform in December.
We did.
And I wonder how you gauge it moving forward to determine we're getting out of this what we want, we're on the right track, or maybe we need to regroup it and redirect.
Well, we got a couple of different ways to do that. One of them is being able to see it expand across domains. So in December, we launched with quality and with public health. We also had cancer and maternal health all represented in the platform. Today, we released behavioral health, which is really exciting. But then on the back end, we can take all of the metadata across those and analyze them and see where is there overlap between the domains and the federal partners, where is there overlap between the data elements themselves. And because of the way our platform is designed, we actually know that a data element that is represented across multiple use cases and domains is the exact same definition across all of them. So we can really visualize and see where there's overlap and harmonization, which is fantastic.
What does this look like in your view as a mature platform? When you've gotten it to a point where you think, okay, I think we've got it the way we want it, what does that look like?
For me, pie in the sky is any federal partner can go in and look and say, this is my program, can I see my data elements in there? And if so, how do I extract them out?
Liz Turry of the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT. A lot of the technology on display here is designed to plug into a network that a healthcare organization already uses. One industry leader says that presents an opportunity for the bad guys. Peter Hancock is Vice President of Global Sales at Assimile. He says vulnerability for healthcare customers is growing.
What we're seeing is that as you're a patient, as you're in that hospital room, you're waiting in the ER, you are at your most vulnerable. You as a human are most vulnerable. And you're expecting that the care that I'm going to receive is the best care I can receive wherever you are in whatever hospital. All the vendors, all the manufacturers that are at this conference today want to provide you that best care. However, security is not at the forefront of their business. Their job is to take care of us as humans. Their tools, their technology, whatever they're selling, and that's their job. Their job isn't necessarily security. So as you plug things into networks, and we're seeing more and more, including beds, are going on network that are automated to tell you your weight, your blood pressure, all that. The operating systems that run these not only have tens, they have hundreds of vulnerabilities. So there was an example of a few hospitals in the last year that have been breached. They were breached and they were exposed because they did not have the most secure of systems. And those hospitals have been offline for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So now you're turning away patients from the ER. You're not able to operate, so you're not able to book revenue. And now you're looking at it and saying, as I plug more and more in, yes, it helps me be more automated, and digital transformation is very important. But at the same time, I go scan a hospital network and I can see that there's systems in there that are 7 years old, and then I can remote connect into those. And once I remote connect in, if I can get to your billing system or I can get to your identity server, I can then grab your identity or I can download all your records. So we were active in a proof of concept, a pilot for our technology with a hospital system in the last month or so. And we were kind of doing a readout to the head of security. And we said, we kind of hate to tell you this, but there's foreign nationals in your network right now. And he said, that's impossible. We said, well, there's a telnet session coming from Asia that they're traversing your network right now. And all of a sudden they closed the door, stopped and said, okay, we need to take action. So we see it all the time. We also see misuse of medical equipment where most medical equipment has an internet browser. And what we see is that people will use that internet browser for personal purposes, whether they're shopping or doing things that adults shouldn't do in the middle of the day when they're at work. So we see all sorts of bad behavior or devices talking to countries that they shouldn't be talking to that open them up to exposure.
We have about a minute left, Peter. Is the fact that some of these things are becoming revenue events, having impact on revenue, driving more action in your view?
Yes. I would say when we were at the show a year ago, we had a good, healthy run of people interested in what we do. This past show, we have customers who are saying, I need to do something now because I don't want to be like my peers. And I need to make this investment because all of a sudden, cybersecurity is number 10 on my list. It's now 1, 2, or 3. And we're absolutely seeing that based on the events of the last few years.
Peter Hancock of Assimile at HIMSS 2024. Thanks for joining me for this Innovation in Government program from HIMSS here in Orlando, presented by Carahsoft. If you missed any part of this program, you can watch the show in its entirety on our website at fedgovtoday.com. Don't miss FedGov Today every Sunday morning at 10:30 on ABC7 in the DC area or on the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Good night. Innovation in Government from DOTUS, presented by Carahsoft, is available now on demand. This program showcases the intersection of technology and government, with insights from government and industry leaders on topics like AI, modernization efforts, secure data movement, and quantum computing. You'll learn from leaders from NGA, DIA, SOCOM, and lots more. To learn more and watch the show, visit innovationingov.com. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today. The new episode of Innovation in Government, presented by Carahsoft, recorded on location at West 24 in San Diego, is available on demand. Watch and listen to leaders from the Navy, Coast Guard, Space Command, and the Marine Corps explain how artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and network modernization are revolutionizing defense strategies and operations. You'll learn more about innovations transforming government and military capabilities. For more information and to watch on demand, visit innovationingov.com. See a vision of the future of national defense.